Well, how did politics enter the picture?
Well, the man who had the seat that I eventually held in the House of Representatives moved out of the district and also decided to run for the Senate about that time. And he called me one day just before filing time was over in the summer of 1990 and said, "I'm leaving this House seat. Why don't you file for it?" And I about fell out of my chair. I was like I was about, "Why don't you audition for television?" I'd never ever thought about being in politics. Never. All those years I had a show didn't have confrontation on it. If people were against, let's take the ERA, that was going on, trying to ratify the ERA for the state of Oklahoma. Those for and those against were never on my show on the same day. I'd have them both, but I don't like people sitting on radio or television yelling at each other about something. Nobody benefits. You don't do anything, you don't even listen to what the other person's saying. I don't like that, but I wanted both sides. I never put a political sign in my yard as long as I was on television. I couldn't have a public opinion about a private subject. That's just not what you do. So I never ever thought about being in politics, just like I never ever thought about being in television. But I did, and I can't tell you what made me decide to. Yes, I can. My nice husband said, "You'd be good at that." Of course, that ornery pothead. We were in different political parties, and we did take a lot of teasing about having a mixed marriage. He was a very active member of his party. I was not a very active member of my party, but we were registered in different parties on purpose so we could go to all precinct meetings, vote in both primaries, and then when it came to the general election, be very independent and voted for whomever we wished, regardless of party, which we both did. Or he said he did. I didn't go in the booth with him, but I'm sure he did, and I did. And I'm sure he did too. But anyway, so I thought, well, for whatever reason, he just said, "Well, you'd be good at that." And he had said that to me about television. He's really kind of pushed me into both of these things. So I filed, and I had 4 opponents in that primary, but I came out of it without a runoff, and then I had a general election against a member of the other party and won that. And it just started, and I found out that legislative work, policymaking, is my real thing. I still would miss it if I were not on the school board, because we make policy. That's what school board members do. They make policy. The school superintendent and his staff carry it out, but the board makes the policy. I like policy making, and I love the legislature. Obviously I like to talk, so I like to debate. I don't want to yell. I don't want to do that. Yeah, I can get angry, but I still don't want to yell about it. And I don't want anybody yelling at me or, calling me names or anything. That's not statesmanship. But taking the best of this and the best of this and putting it to this so that you have something that you can really applaud over, that's statesmanship, and that's what I like to do. I found out. Still like it.
What were some of the issues that you were really passionate about when you were serving
in the legislature?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was not only passionate about, but most noted for, I guess, if noted is the right word. Those who didn't like the legislation didn't think I was noted. They thought I was nuts, but that's okay. Or I started reading Sufficiency Act, which at that point, although it's been modified several times with different aspects, improved in some ways and not in others. But it was insistent that if children didn't learn to read early, they must learn to, let's put it positively, children must learn to read and read well early in their school life, or they're probably going to be a candidate to drop out later, because you don't do well at anything if you don't have a good base in reading. So the Reading Sufficiency Act was even copied as a national model. I liked that. I set up the Department of Rehabilitative Services as a separate agency because they were in DHS, and DHS had so many things under its umbrella that they needed to be. Rehabilitative needs are a little different than entitlement needs are. So we set that up, and that I liked that. Did a lot of work with the disabled folks, a lot of work with education. Started this school. I carried the House version of OSU Tulsa to establish this school, this university here in Tulsa. Pleased about that. Did a lot of work with the medical communities, a lot of breast cancer work. Set up the breast cancer fund, a revolving fund to assist women who were either uninsured or underinsured, and raise the awareness of the necessity for having early detection of any kind of cancer, but most particularly at that point the breast cancer fund. And that was highly successful and very emotional. And so health, education, the welfare of people, those were my general thing. I know nothing about agriculture. I was born in the middle of downtown Tulsa, so practically, so I know nothing about agriculture, so to speak. I'm not stupid, but that's not my thing. Obviously, I'm not very astute about banking and finance. I know nothing about the insurance agency except that I carry it, and I need it and all this. So there were several subjects that I participated in by voting, because you have to learn about them and vote, but they were not the things I was passionate about. It was the education of our children and lifelong learning, and it was those who had rehabilitative needs or had special needs, we'll say, children, anything to do with children, early education or the abolishment of child abuse in as much as possible and this kind of thing. Those were my really favorite things, along with helping the Oklahoma Medical Association with many projects, particularly in the cancer field. That was about it.
It's pretty good for 10 years.
Yeah, they were full, and I never lost a bill, ever. And I was pretty pleased about that. I was very lucky in many respects, I'm sure, but when you're a wife, and I was the first great-grandmother to ever serve in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. And I was a great-grandmother at that time. So I thought that was pretty nice. Age, your effectiveness doesn't necessarily depend on your age or your gender. It doesn't. When I went over there were only 5 women in the House of 101. Only 5 women. And I wasn't there because I was a woman. I was just there because I got elected. So I never felt discriminated against. One little reporter one day said, "Well, are you going to play in the golf tournament that the fellows are having?" And I said, "No, I'm not." "Well, didn't they invite you?" And I said, "Well, I don't play golf. That's why I'm not going. If I hit something and chase it myself, you're going to have to put me in the funny farm. I just don't do that." So that's why. But people thought that women were looked down on in the legislature. No, I didn't have any problem that way. In the first place, I was enough of a grandma, I'd have paddled them if they'd done that, but corporal punishment or not. But I never felt looked down on or put upon because of that, but I never expected any special privilege. But I knew how to debate, and I did my homework on my stuff, and I carried good measures, or I wouldn't have carried them. And I was proud of that. And I'm sorry if that seems pride-filled, but I was very proud of never having lost a bill when I was the 10 years I was in the House. And I carried a lot of measures. Not the first year. The first year I sat and learned. But beyond that, I carried a lot of stuff. But it was all good enough to pass.